Hello everyone, today is April 28th, 2026 and welcome back to my YouTube channel, The Political Report. For today's video, I wanted to cover the 2026 Rhode Island gubernatorial election, which is actually in a dead heat in one of the most competitive Democratic primaries of this entire 2026 election cycle. Now I say this as the former CVS executive, Helena Foulkes, launched her second gubernatorial campaign in the state of Rhode Island. And as you can see here in this article, she ended up launching her second campaign here near the end of last year. Now this is interesting because the current governor of the state of Rhode Island is incumbent Dan McKee. Dan McKee, despite him currently being the incumbent governor, has actually served as a lieutenant governor of Rhode Island for a much longer time. Looking back at 2014, he ran as a lieutenant governor on the Democratic ticket with Gina Raimondo, where she ended up winning the governor's election and subsequently being elected the governor of Rhode Island. Dan McKee once again rode her coattails in 2018 when she was elected with 52.6% of the vote, being re-elected as the Rhode Island governor. However, news broke in 2021 as Joe Biden was inaugurated and won the election in 2020. Joe Biden was weighing U.S. Senate confirmations of his cabinet. He ended up nominating and confirming incumbent governor Mrs. Raimondo as the United States Commerce Secretary, leading to Dan McKee being sworn in as a Rhode Island governor subsequently. After he was sworn in as governor, he became the incumbent in the race in 2022 for the gubernatorial election. However, many scandals, falling poll numbers, and negative press ended up ruining some of his chances in the Democratic primaries, where despite him being the incumbent governor at the time, because he replaced the outgoing resigned governor, he actually only ended up winning approximately 32% of the vote as an incumbent governor. Now you might be thinking, he ended up winning. This was a big four-way race and he ended up coming out victorious. But 32%, regardless of the situation, is a horrid number for any incumbent governor in the entire country, despite being the incumbent governor in the race. You can see here he faced off against the former CVS executive, Helena Foulkes. As mentioned before when I said that this is Helena Foulkes' second campaign, this is because he ended up going against her in the first campaign here in 2022, where the former CVS executive ended up accumulating nearly 30% of the vote, only around 2 to 3 percentage points behind the incumbent governor. A lot of this news is coming back to bite him for the 2026 gubernatorial election, where once again, former CVS executive and the niece of former U.S. Senator Chris Dodd launched her campaign for governor again for this 2026 Rhode Island race. However, in this 2026 election, there are not anywhere near as many Democrats contesting the race, so Dan McKee does not have the privilege of a split vote split between 5 Democrats, dividing the vote evenly among all of them, leading to Dan McKee winning. This time, when you look at the polls, it's really only a two-way race, with the exception of the third candidate, Gregory Stevens, polling in the single digits. You can see here that the former CVS executive is consistently beating Dan McKee in all of the public polling available, where she is winning anywhere from 24 to 45% of the vote. However, Dan McKee as the incumbent governor is only polling anywhere from 11 to 20% of the vote, which is an even worse number than what he got in the 2022 primary. At the current rate, the aggregate between all of the polling numbers show Helena winning by around 20 percentage points as her margin, which is nowhere near a close contest, which is why this is a shocking result, considering Dan McKee is an incumbent governor doing this poorly in the Democratic primary. But why is his polling numbers falling? So, a lot of his polling numbers actually have to do with corruption and scandals happening at the statewide government level in Rhode Island, where his approval rating continues to sink among the residents of the state, leading many to wonder how much longer McKee has to go as the governor, as his poor polling numbers continue to dog in on the incumbent governor. Now this article here goes over this question, where they go over the University of New Hampshire showing more and more disapproval numbers for Dan McKee as the governor of Rhode Island. This goes to show that a lot of the residents in the state of Rhode Island are fed up with the incumbent Democratic governor, and despite him being a Democrat, the scandals and the living conditions around the state in Rhode Island have begun to deteriorate over the past few years, with rising costs of living, inflation, along with all of the scandals that the state government is facing. This gives a clear picture as to why Dan McKee is really having a bad time in his 2026 gubernatorial election. Now, this being a state in New England in the northeastern part of the United States, the primary elections will not occur until September 9th, 2026, leaving an entire 5 months between today and then when the primary elections will occur. So with that being said, Helena Foulkes at this current moment is leading by approximately 20 percentage points and has a floor of around 35%. But with 5 months remaining on the campaign trail for both the Democrats, it begs the question, at what point will the numbers begin to get better for Dan McKee? And if they don't get better at all, would he consider dropping out and coalescing behind Helena Foulkes? Now, this has caused a lot of infighting within Rhode Island politics, where a lot of the Democrats loyal to the current governor and to the current administration in Rhode Island are begging Democratic voters to stand behind and vote for Dan McKee, where the challenger, Helena Foulkes, the former CBS executive, is increasing her bid and presumably going to win against the incumbent governor, Dan McKee. Now, contrary to all of the other videos I've made about Democratic infighting in their primaries across the United States, this is one of the instances where I believe that Democrats are better off and could afford the infighting and the results they might get from this election. Helena Foulkes, being a former CBS executive, is presumably a multimillionaire and has more than enough money to self-fund her entire campaign. And with the current lead and just an overall population of the state, you can see that Rhode Island is not the most expensive and or the most consequential state in the country, leading Democrats to believe that, yeah, this primary process where if they are able to oust their very unpopular governor, Dan McKee, and replace it with a candidate of their choice, such as the former CBS executive, Helena Foulkes, that they might have a better time here, as this will not result into any negative implications for the Democratic Party as a whole when it comes to the November elections. Now, time for my prediction. Where do things stand now? So as mentioned, Helena Foulkes is clearly within the lead of around 20 percentage points, and Dan McKee performing so poorly in the current polls, only hovering around 11 to 20%, and his previous underperformance in the 2022 election leads me to believe that at this current point, 4 to 5 months is nowhere near enough time for such a scandal-plagued incumbent governor to close the margin in the race. I believe that Helena Foulkes will go ahead and run away with this election at the Democratic primary level, presumably beating Dan McKee by around the 20 percentage points they have listed here. But if his poll numbers continue to be this low at only around 11 to 20%, I would not find it surprising if she ends up beating him by more than 40% by the time the primaries come around. Now the question is, does he just end up dropping out, as the numbers seem to be only getting worse for him and have not been improving? So with that being said, everyone, that was my coverage on the 2026 Rhode Island gubernatorial election. I know that this is maybe one of the more niche states where not that many people live in Rhode Island, and there are not that many national implications for this race, but I thought it would be a good video to cover as a prime example of the primary challenges that are actually working and successfully ousting some of the incumbents across the United States. Please let me know what you think about the video down below. Additionally, if you have any ideas or video suggestions of the next video I should make, please also leave that as a comment. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below, and also check out the playlists I have here at the end of the screen. I'll be uploading more videos this week, so stay tuned. With that being said, everyone, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you all then.